So 4-6, all of 4-6 today. If this was a regular day, we would just kind of split it up into 4-6 A and B, but we're going to do all of 4-6. So it's a little bit, but I think I'm going to give you a good 30 minutes probably to do your homework at the end. It won't take too long. All right, so we're going to do something called square roots and completing the square. Square roots and completing the square. Completing the, and I'm going to draw a square, even though it has nothing to do with squares. Sort of. Yeah, it kind of does. All right, let's go ahead. We're going to first do the square roots part, okay? Now, the solve by finding square roots is going to be some special, it's like a special case, okay? It's when you are missing that middle term. You had one last night. It was number, yes, 52. Mm-hmm. Did you see that? Yeah. And you might have solved that by factoring or by graphing, but right now we're going to solve by finding the square roots. Here's what I mean. Suppose you have x squared equals 16. Okay, I don't need to factor that. I don't need to do quadratic formula. I can pretty much look at that and figure out the answers. Can you look at that? Yeah.
4.
Okay. -4 also. Oh, right? Yeah, we got to be careful. When we solve this, we are going to square root. The square root and the squared get rid of each other, but when we do that, we have to take the plus and minus square root. Whenever you're solving and you square root both sides of an equation, you have to do plus and minus, so then you end up with two answers, plus and minus 4. Because 4 squared is 16 and -4 squared is also 16. All right, so here we go. Basically, we do this when there is no b term, bx. I'll say bx term. Okay, so you only have a squared term and a constant, and that's it. There's no x in the middle there. So let's do it. Here we go. Number 1. Let's do that one from last night. Okay? -3x squared plus 147 equals 0. And so when you solved this last night, you may have solved by factoring, because 147 is divisible by 3. Maybe you factored out a -3. Okay, we're not going to do it that way today. Today we're going to solve by finding square roots. So here's what you do. You want to solve for x squared. So we're going to subtract 147 over to the other side. And then we're going to divide both sides by -3. And we get x squared equals 49. Okay. And then you're going to take the plus and minus square root. And so you get x could be either +7 or -7. And those are your two answers. And you got those answers last night, maybe by factoring. You factored out a -3, and then you factored some more, and you get x +7 and x -7. See, that's another way to do it. Today, this is a little bit easier, I think, by finding square roots. Yeah. Okay, let's do this one, number 2. Now, is life going to be perfect all the time? No. Are we going to have perfect squares all the time? No. So let's do this. 7x squared minus 10 equals 25. Now, we are allowed to solve this by finding square roots because there's no x term. There's an x squared, but there's no regular x, okay? So we can add 10 to the other side and divide by 7. So I get x squared is equal to 5. Now, the last one I gave you, last two really, had perfect squares. When it doesn't have a perfect square, that's okay. Just take the plus and minus square root and leave it. And those are your two answers, plus rad 5 and negative rad 5. Those are them, okay? All right, so I gave you a perfect square. I gave you one that didn't have, yeah. Oh, and that's my next one, number 3. Yes, you're one step ahead of us. I got a little too excited there. All right, 2x squared minus 20 equals 20. Okay, so his question was, what if that perfect square, or what if that square root has a perfect square in it? Are we required? Yes, we are. We got to take that out. Okay, so let's solve this one. Same steps as last time. Add the 20, divide by 2. Can you do that in your head? Can you get there without showing the work?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm fine with that. People really want a lot of work shown. If you're like at that point now in your mathematical career, you know, that's headed in the right direction, you just add 20 over, you get 40, divide by 2, and you get 20. Okay, good. Now, take the plus and minus. That's what people will forget to do. And you know what you're doing when you forget plus and minus? You're forgetting half of the answers. So you'll get half of the problem wrong. And you know what half is? It's 50%. You know what 50% is? It's an L. Oh, an F. You're right. All right. Divide by 20, or around 20. And people are like, oh, I got an L on that. I'm like, I don't give out L's. I give out A, B, C, D, F. That's pretty much it. Okay. But I do know where it comes from. So rad 20 has a 4 in there. 4 times 5, right? We did this earlier last week. And so we get 2 answers, which are going to be plus or minus 2 rad 5. Don't you like these? Say yes. Just pretend. Okay, last one. Number 4, last one of these. And then we'll get to the harder stuff. What happens when this is what happens? 2x squared plus 8 is equal to 13. Okay. So we still have to use our same rules that we did when we were doing radicals before. Let's go ahead and subtract 8 to the other side. If you want to write your steps down, go ahead. It's fine. Divide by 2. Do not make that into a decimal. Okay, we cannot have decimals inside of our radicals. And then we're going to take the plus and minus square root here. Now, there's a little bit of a problem. We learned on that worksheet that I gave you that you can't have, yeah? Yes, you can't have fractions inside of your radicals or decimals. You cannot have radicals in the denominator either. So what we do to fix this, we took a day doing these before, is we're going to split it up into rad 5 over rad 2, which fixed one problem, which was our fractions can't be in our radicals, but it created a new problem. So we can't have radicals in the denominator. So do you remember how to fix that? You multiply top and bottom by rad 2 over rad 2. And so then you get plus or minus rad 5 times rad 2 is rad 10, and rad 2 times rad 2 is 2. So those are your 2 answers in completely simplified radical form. It's a lot of work, huh? It's the opposite of slight work. Yeah. Okay. So that's the 4th way. So now you have 4 ways to solve a quadratic, and we're going to go ahead and finish this up with the 5th and final way. Here we go. We're going to complete the square. Complete the square. Now, you have seen perfect square trinomials. Remember, those were those shortcuts that we did? Like, for example, 4x squared. No. I need to think of a really good one. Minus 40x plus 25. Okay? Do you remember factoring these? Yeah. What we did was this was one of our special cases where this whole thing is a perfect square. It is. Go ahead. Thanks. All right. Is it because I yelled at that other kid that did it? Yeah, okay. Sorry. All right, 4x squared is 2x times 2x, and 25 is 5 times 5. Oops, this should be a 20 in the middle. I knew I did something wrong. I felt like it. I was trying to make it up on the fly, but it wasn't working. And then in the middle is a minus. Okay? Do you remember doing these? Factoring as a perfect square. Okay. What we're going to do is we are going to solve that way. Okay? So let me show you number 5. Suppose you have x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 25. And we're going to solve this by finding our square roots again. But if you notice on the left side, this whole thing is a perfect square itself. Do you know how this factors? What times what's 4 adds up to 4? X plus 2 and x plus 2. So the whole thing is x plus 2 squared. And now, once you get to here, you know what you can do? Square root. Exactly. X plus 2 equals, and when you take the square root, don't forget to do plus and minus 5. Okay? And then we'll have to subtract 2 to the other side. Usually they'll put it on the front of it. And then we'll get our 2 answers. There's 2 answers here. Do you see them? There's negative 2 plus 5 and negative 2 minus 5. So where did I lose you?
Okay, so x plus 2.
Right here.
Yeah, right there,
Okay, so we got that, right?
yeah.
You were good there. Then what we did was we needed to get rid of this squared right here, so we square root.
There you go.
That gets rid of it. But then when you square root this side, you have to do plus and minus.
Can you show the step of square rooting? You just square root.
Square root, and then don't forget to put a plus or minus in front. And then you get x plus 2 is plus or minus 5, and there's 2 answers here. It's going to be, I'll show you this way. It's negative 2 plus 5, which is 3, and then it's negative 2 minus 5, which is negative 7. 2 answers. Yay. Okay. Now here's the thing. What happens when it's not a perfect square? You know what we're going to do? We're going to make it to be a perfect square. Yes. All right, here we go. Here comes the complete the square part. I'm kind of doing all of these in little steps, and then at the very end, we're going to put it all together. All right, here we go. You need to complete this perfect square. Here it is. X squared plus 6x plus blank. We need to make this so that the whole thing is a perfect square. Okay, this can't be any old number. It can't be 10 or 5. It has to be a perfect square. And how do we get that perfect square? Well, we're not just going to sit here and guess. We have a formula. Do you want to know it? Here it is. The formula is, now I'm going to put like magical stars around this thing because it's amazing. 1/2 of b squared. This is the key right here to solving by completing the square. You have to know this. Okay? You take half of the middle term and then you square it, and what you're doing is you're making this into a perfect square. So what's half of 6?
3.
And 3 squared is? 9. We just made that into a perfect square. This will factor as x plus 3 squared. Yeah, so that's the key right here, right there. Let's try another one. I said it regular that time. X squared, I had to like really make myself say it regular, minus 18x plus blank. It's always plus at the end, by the way, because whenever you square a number, it's positive, well, a real number. All right, so take half of the middle term, do that in your head, and then square it. What do you get? 81. Yep. Okay. What you just did, and you're like, okay, what's the big deal? You just completed the square. You just made this into a perfect square that factors as x minus 9 squared. And if you're ever wondering how I got that 9 right there, the negative 9, it's always half of the middle term, or it's the square root of the last number, and it's whatever the sign is in the middle is going to be the sign there. You try one. You try another one. Here we go. Try this one. X squared minus 14x plus blank. You complete the square, okay, complete it for me, and then factor. So all we're doing is we're completing the square. We're making these into perfect squares for our enjoyment. No, there's gonna be a benefit coming up. Okay, especially if you memorize that. Then you're not like guessing like, what is it, what is it? You take half the middle term and you square it and you get 49, my age. And then you go x minus 7 squared. There it is. Very nice. I'm not 49. I'm just kidding. I'm more like 39. That's not true either. Okay, now let's put it all together. Okay? Are you ready? We're now going to solve by completing the square. Now, this is your brother's favorite way to do it. Is he crazy? Right? Not that brother. His favorite way to do it is to play critical ops over there. Look at him.
What's that?
Solve by I'm sorry to interrupt you. You look really busy. Do you have 2 iPads?
No.
Oh, you took it out of its case?
I'm not even using it.
That's funny.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's been so into it this whole time. He hasn't paid attention at all. You're going to need to Skype.
Look at my notes.
Nah, you're going to need to Skype Matthew and ask him how to do this stuff later. Okay, here we go. Number 6. Solve by completing the square. Here we go. Okay, suppose I have x squared plus 6x plus 5 equals 12. Okay. All right, I need to solve this by completing the square. I can't do quadratic formula, I can't factor, I'm not allowed to do any of those things. I'm going to do completing the square. So here they are. I'm going to run through all the steps with you. There's like 5 or 6, maybe 7. There's a lot of steps. So here we go. Step number 1. First thing you're going to do is you are going to take the constant and move it to the other side. So take that constant, because that constant's in the way. Is 5 a perfect square? No. What's it doing there? We don't want it there. Take the constant and move it to the other side. Sometimes we're going to add, sometimes we subtract, but we're going to take that and move it to the other side, okay? When I do that, I'm left with x squared plus 6x, leave yourself a little blank there, equals 7. Okay, so all I did was step 1, I moved the 5 to the other side. All right, step 2. Step 2 is to take half of the middle term, half of b, and square it. Okay, so what's half of 6 squared? 9. Now, do you know the golden rule of algebra? Exactly. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. This is an equation. Okay? I think of it as like scales, and if I add 9 to this side, my scales aren't balanced anymore. I have to add 9 to the other side too. So golden rule of algebra, whatever you do to one side, do into the other. All right. Now we need to just kind of clean that up a little bit. So we get x squared plus 6x plus 9 is equal to 16. Is everyone okay so far? Mm-hmm.
What happened to 12?
We subtracted 5 and got 7.
Oh.
Yep. Okay, step 3. We'll do this in green. Step 3 is to now factor. Now that you have created this perfect square for yourself, factor it into a perfect square. So what is this x squared plus 6x plus 9 factor? X plus 3 squared equals 16. Okay? Step 4. Now we're going to take the plus and minus square root to solve. See the squared right here? I need to get rid of it, so I take the square root. So when I do that, I'm left with x plus 3 equals what? Plus or minus 4. The square root of 16. Okay? You square root this, you square root that. Don't forget plus or minus. The square and the square root cancel each other out, leaving you with this. And finally, step number 5 is to solve for x. So we'll subtract 3 to the other side, and I get negative 3 plus or minus 4, which is negative 3 plus 4 is 1, and negative 3 minus 4 is negative 7. Those are your 2 answers. It does. How can this be someone's favorite? I don't know. And it's really funny because someone in my last class said, when are we ever going to use this in real life? And I'm like, you're not, but that doesn't mean we don't do it. But then this happened. My brother-in-law sent me this question today, and it says, find the center and radius using standard form of circle. You know what you do in this problem? You complete the square. Ha! Isn't that crazy? And so then I worked it out for him, and I did it, and I found the radius, and I even graphed it for him. But see, this is real life. This is my real life. People actually ask me questions like that. It's not sad. It's amazing. All right, number 7. Let's do another one. Here we go. X squared, ooh, everyone's flipping pages, huh? Minus 10x minus 3 equals 1. Okay, we're gonna do all the steps again. I'll do them in the same colors as I did the last ones. That was kind of fun. So, first step, get rid of that constant. See that negative 3 there? It's not helping us. We want to get a perfect square over here. Negative 3 is nowhere near to a perfect square. So I'm going to add it to the other side. So I get x squared minus 10x. Remember, leave yourself a little blank here. Equals 4. And you can even put a blank there too because you're going to have to add to both sides. Okay? Just to remind yourself. So that's step number 1. Step number 2 is completing the square step. You have to take half of negative 10 and square it, and you're going to add that number to both sides. So half of negative 10 is negative 5. Negative 5 squared is 25. That number is always going to be what? Starts with the P. Positive. Good job. No, that number here, that complete the square step, is always adding it to both sides. Okay, so that was step number 2. Step 3 is to factor. What is this factor as? Yes, x minus 5 squared equals 29. Yeah.
Did you combine step 1 and 2?
No.
Oh.
They're in different colors. Step 1 is in blue, where I added that 3 over to the other side. And then step 2 is in red. Step 3 is in green. All right, so now at this point, we need to take the plus and minus square root. And you know what? You're like, oh, wow, it's not a perfect square. That's okay. Just leave it as rad 29. You're actually going to like those better. And then finally, your last step is to solve for x. So we're going to add 5 to the other side. And our answers are going to be 5 plus or minus rad 29. There you go. Would you like to try one now? Yeah, you would. Thank you, Moira. Yeah. Number 8. You try this one, all by your cute little self. X squared plus 8x plus 1 equals 5. Try this one. This is your brother's. This is his favorite way. Let's do it. All right, first thing, we're going to subtract 1 to the other side. Okay? When you do that, leave yourself a little break here.
No.
Yes.
I messed up.
Oh. Okay. You messed up on that already?
I meant adding to the 4.
Oh, yep. You got to do under one's golden rule of algebra. You broke the golden rule. Okay. Now here's the next step. Take half of b, square it, and add that number to both sides. So I'm going to add 16 now to both sides. Okay? That's my favorite step. It really is. All right, now we're going to factor x plus 4 squared equals 20. Ooh, we've seen that guy earlier today. Take the plus and minus square root of 20. Now 20 is not a perfect square, but it has a perfect square in there. We already rationalized this one today, remember? So then you get x plus 4 equals plus or minus 2 rad 5. One more step. Usually they'll put it in the front, because if you put it in the back, it might be like, is the radical over the whole thing? So they put it up front, and those are your 2 answers. Who got that? Anybody? Oh, good. Yes. A lot of people got that. Okay. In case someone's watching the video and wanted to know how many people.